I never thought I'd have to go to court over something as simple as a lawn, but here we are. My name's Daniel Harper, and it all started with a Sunday morning just like any other, until I saw something that made me realize things were about to change. It was a woman wearing a pastel cardigan strolling across my yard, tossing her coffee cup into my wife's flower bed like it was nothing. And just like that, everything shifted. Not snapped, not exploded, just shifted slow and heavy like a door closing. I wasn't a hothead. Hell, I was a city guy once, Chicago 2009. Elise, my wife, and I were tired of the noise, the crowds, the constant chaos. We'd both just turned 40, and we'd had enough. The city life wasn't for us anymore. So we packed up and moved to Maple Hollow, a tiny little town in western Pennsylvania. 2 stoplights, 1 hardware store, a diner that served meatloaf on Wednesdays, and a church that rang its bell every Sunday at 9 sharp. Picture perfect. We found the house a Victorian built in 1889, just over 2 acres of land. When we saw it, it was like we were meant to be there. Elise stood in the yard, arms wide open, laughing like a kid dreaming about what to plant where. We could have peonies here, hydrangeas by the fence, maybe a little orchard, she said, and we bought it within a month. The first 6 years were everything we hoped for. The church next door was small, maybe 50, 60 people on a busy Sunday, and we'd wave to them as they walked by. We didn't mind. We even donated to their Christmas toy drive, and Elise baked pies for their summer fundraiser. It was neighborly, it was quiet, and it was simple. Until 2016, when they hired a new pastor, Pastor Nolan Briggs. Sharp jawline, perfectly pressed shirts, the kind of guy who looked like he just stepped out of a magazine. He came from a megachurch outside Columbus, and he was a visionary, they said. What that really meant was more services, more events, and way more people. And with that, more cars, more SUVs, more minivans. The church lot could barely hold 40 cars, and soon they started parking on Maple Street, then Oak, and finally right along the narrow gravel shoulder that bordered our property. At first it wasn't so bad. A few people cutting across our lawn to get to the church. I noticed it while I was trimming the hedges. A guy in loafers walking diagonally through our grass just like that. That's new, I thought. A week later there were 3 people. A couple weeks after that, maybe 10. And by the time the weather warmed up, there was a visible path cutting across our yard right where the grass used to be. I noticed Elise didn't laugh it off like she used to. She spent years cultivating that garden, knew every bulb, every root system. To her, it wasn't just dirt and plants. It was a reflection of her care. The next few weeks, things got worse. People weren't just walking anymore. They were dragging strollers, kids running donuts being crushed into the soil. One afternoon, I found a plastic communion cup wedged between my hostas. That's when I decided to talk to Pastor Briggs. I caught him after the second service standing by the doors, shaking hands like he was running for office. I waited until the crowd thinned and shook his hand. "Pastor, I'm Daniel Harper, your neighbor. I wanted to talk to you about the congregation cutting across our lawn. It's starting to cause some damage. Do you think you could ask people to use the sidewalk instead?" He nodded sympathetically, apologized, said he'd announce it in the next service. It sounded good, right? So I went home feeling relieved, thinking the problem would be solved. Except the next Sunday was worse. There were more people than ever, and it was like my request had advertised the shortcut. I stood at the window watching as waves of them crossed our lawn. A woman in heels stumbled on one of Elise's stepping stones and knocked it sideways. 2 teenage boys cut through the flower bed instead of going around it. And that's when it happened, the coffee cup. That's when I called Pastor Briggs again. "Hey, Nolan, it's actually gotten worse," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. "Well, Daniel," he said, "I did mention it, but you know how it is. When people see others doing something, they follow. It's about convenience. Put up signs, private property, please use. Put up signs, private property, please use sidewalk." They were ignored, knocked over, or disappeared. But it wasn't about the plants anymore. It was the quiet entitlement, the assumption that our yard was an extension of their parking lot. One night Elise said, "If we don't draw a line now, there won't be a line left to draw." That's when I called a lawyer. Her name was Margaret Ellis, mid-60s, sharp as a tack. When I explained what was happening, she didn't hesitate. "Daniel," she said, folding her hands, "that's trespassing, plain and simple." She sent a formal letter demanding they stop. 2 weeks later, we got their response. They claimed the path across our property was a historic pedestrian route. I actually laughed when I read it. There was no path before 2016, no record of it. For 6 years, there had been nothing. Margaret didn't laugh. "They're testing you," she said. And that's when the neighborly misunderstanding turned into something else, a fight. Once the lawyers got involved, I thought the church would finally back off. But no. Instead, attendance hit a record high and Sunday mornings became even more crowded. People streamed across our yard like it was a parade, silent but with an air of defiance. And then came the sermon. Apparently, Pastor Briggs had addressed obstacles to growth from the pulpit without naming names, but it was clear what he meant. "Resistance comes from unexpected places," he said, but they responded with grace. Grace. That word made my skin crawl. We weren't resisting church, we were resisting the invasion of our private property. By October, Elisa's garden looked tired. Not destroyed, but worn down. I saw the hesitation in her eyes when she planted anything near that worn path. It was no longer just about grass. It was about our home, our peace. Then came the church's response. They doubled down on the historic pedestrian route claim. They even had affidavits from 2 longtime members who swore they remembered the path being there for decades. Margaret wasn't impressed. "Memory is flexible," she said, shaking her head. She pulled property records, old plats, surveys, zoning maps. Nothing. Not a single recorded easement. They didn't have it. By the time court rolled around in February, the whole thing felt like a war. The church's attorney argued for community benefit. They even claimed we were being hostile. Hostile, I couldn't help but laugh. We just want to protect our home. The judge, Harold Whittaker, was calm as he reviewed the case. He didn't ask for a lot of drama, just the facts. And then he asked the church's attorney to show the easement. "There is no recorded easement, Your Honor," the attorney admitted. And that was it. The judge ruled in our favor. No recorded easement, no legal right to walk across our land. The church was ordered to stop immediately and to post signs directing people to use the sidewalk. It felt good. Not victorious, just right. But it wasn't over. The church tried to fight back, claiming the hedge I'd planted was malicious. They called it a spite fence, built solely to obstruct them. But the judge wasn't buying it. He ruled that we had a right to landscape our property, and he even ordered the church to pay for our legal fees and damages. And then something shifted in the town. Some people avoided us, others were more supportive. Mrs. Calloway brought us a pie. A couple down the street admitted they'd been frustrated by the parking overflow but didn't know how to say anything. 3 years have passed since that battle. The hedge has grown tall, thick, and lush, a solid green wall. On Sundays, I still hear the church bells, but now people walk along the sidewalk. They're not cutting through our yard anymore. And sometimes I wonder, was it too much? Should we have let it go for the sake of harmony? Or is protecting your home, your peace, exactly what you're supposed to do? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you have handled it differently? Would you have just let it go? Or is there a line you have to draw when people keep stepping over it?